Hello, everyone. Welcome. We'll take a few moments and allow people time to join us. Welcome, welcome. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. We're glad you're here. Just going to continue to wait a few moments and allow people time to join us. Bienvenidos. All right, I think we are officially going to get started. So hello, everyone, and welcome to Hawk Mountain Sanctuary's Stay at Home Speaker Series. Today's program is Raptor Migration Throughout the Western Palearctic with Dr. Alejandro Onrubia, coordinator of the Migres Foundation's Bird Migration Monitoring Program through the Strait of Gibraltar. Welcome, Dr. Alejandro Onrubia.
Hello. Hi.
We're so glad you're joining us today. And my name is Jamie Dawson, and I'm the Director of Education at Hawk Mountain Sanctuary. Thank you, everyone in the audience, for joining us today. We're so glad you're here. As you may know, Hawk Mountain is the world's very first refuge for birds of prey, and we continue to work hard to be leaders in raptor conservation, science, and education, locally and globally. Hawk Mountain is a private nonprofit, and membership is the lifeblood of our organization. So to all of our members out there, thank you so very much for your continued support. And if you're joining us today and you're not a member, we hope that you consider becoming one in the future. Hawk Mountain hopes that everyone remains safe and healthy throughout 2023, and we are thrilled to be able to offer our local and global community a variety of free virtual programming. But as always, Hawk Mountain greatly appreciates and depends on donations. Just so everyone is aware, today's program is being recorded. The video will then be accessible on our YouTube channel as a continued resource. We also have a link on our website that can directly connect you to our YouTube channel. And at any point during today's program, you are welcome to submit your questions through the Q&A feature of the Zoom platform. And we've designated some time at the end of the program to take some questions from the audience. And we are so excited that Dr. Alejandro Onrubia is joining us all the way from Spain, where it's 11 o'clock at night. And he's joining us to share with us insights from the fascinating migration phenomenon in the Strait of Gibraltar, and to also share with us the monitoring projects of Migres Foundation. Before we go further, I'd like to take a moment to share some of Dr. Alejandro Onrubia's extensive experience with our audience. So here we go. Dr. Alejandro Onrubia of Valladolid, Spain, received his PhD in biological sciences from the University of León in Spain in 1966, with the thesis, Spatio-Temporal Patterns of Soaring Bird Migration Through the Strait of Gibraltar. For 30 years, he has been professionally involved in various works and projects related to nature conservation and wildlife management, linked to the University of Cantabria, Foundation for Ecology and Environmental Protection, Spanish Ornithological Society, and University of León. Dr. Onrubia has 14 years of experience in environmental consulting in northern Spain and 15 years with Migres Foundation. He is an expert in the capturing and marking of wild fauna, with 35 years as an expert bird bander accredited by the Spanish Ministry of Environment. He has also been a scientific diver since 1990, and that sounds really cool, I must say. Dr. Onrubia has attended 120 national and international courses, congresses, and conferences related to nature conservation, and has presented 150 talks and conferences in various master's courses, conferences, and congresses. In addition, he has more than 190 publications in scientific journals with more than 860 citations. Since 2006, he has worked as a technician for the Migres Foundation and currently is the coordinator of Migres program for monitoring bird migration through the Strait of Gibraltar. Alejandro, your experience is so impressive. I feel like so much smarter just talking to you virtually. It's amazing, all the things you have done. So I want to ask you, what inspired you to pursue this career path studying bird migration?
Thank you very much, Jamie. I was born and grew up in the north of Spain, which is an extraordinary migratory corridor for birds. And since I was a child, the continuous movement of birds to the north or south caught my attention. Soon, I started bird watching and became a bird bander at the age of 16. So studying birds in hand opened up a new world for me. My first recovery was a kingfisher in France. So I said, okay, it's true. These birds perform extraordinary journeys. Since then, I have not stopped studying and being surprised by the migration of birds. In the 1980s, I visited the Strait of Gibraltar for the first time, and I was fascinated by this place. And in 1996, I started as a volunteer in the monitoring bird migration. And in 2006, I continued doing this in a professional way at Migres Foundation.
Wow, amazing. So what is your favorite part of your work? What is the most rewarding part? But on the other side, what's also the most challenging?
Okay, the place, the Strait of Gibraltar is a place where migration is shown in all its splendor. The migratory passage is absolutely spectacular. And there are days when the view of the African coastline and thousands of birds crossing the sea can turn the observation into something magical. We work marking birds with rings, GPS, and small geolocators. And these devices involve recapturing the birds in the following year. And it's a real challenge to recapture the same birds that returns with that device. And when one downloads the information of the geolocator and said, bingo, you see the extraordinary journey that has made to Africa, and this is fascinating.
Sounds absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Well, we are excited for your presentation. Are you ready?
Yes, I tried to. Okay, is on the screen. I think that I stopped the video to have a better image.
Looks perfect.
Okay, yeah. Okay, in this talk, I would like to introduce you about the raptor migrations throughout the Western Palearctic and the role of the Strait of Gibraltar for monitoring birds of prey. In this talk, I would like, this is the moment to, that's the, okay, this is the second slide. This is the contents of the presentation. First, I will make a brief summary about raptor migration through the Western Palearctic. After that, I also explain some of the projects that we do in the Strait of Gibraltar, and finally, I show some results of our research and the lessons from the Strait of Gibraltar. In the first part, I would like to introduce you about this important migratory system. You know that migration is a response of birds to seasonality, as the environment is changing over the year related with the sun radiation, and the birds try to track and follow the green waves that is forming in different areas of the of the world. So the migration is a kind to survive following these seasonal environments. As the migration is a response to seasonality, the amount and the proportion of migratory species is higher and at high latitudes. In over the temperate areas and the polar areas, 60 or 80% of the species that live there are migratory. In the tropical areas, the conditions are very stable along the year, and the proportion of migratory species is very low, even except some altitudinal migrations. Most of the species are resident, sedentary, and don't make big movements. But you see in the green square, you can see the study area of the Palearctic, African Palearctic bird migration system. And you can see that in Europe, more than half of the species that live here are migratory, and is related with the seasonality of the European area. The raptors show a similar pattern, and in Europe there are 40 species of diurnal raptors, and most of them are migratory. More than 80% of the diurnal raptors of Europe are migratory. And these raptors, as other birds or other migratory birds, follow these flyways, these routes that are in the X of north to south. This is the trend of the sun radiation in the world. And these birds move to the north for breeding, and after breeding, migrate to the south for the overwinter, in this case in the Mediterranean area or in Africa, and follow these important flyways. The red dots show areas or points where concentrate more than 100,000 of raptors during migration. In these points, with a very limited effort, you can control or monitor raptors populations from in a continental expectation. This is our study area, the African Western Palearctic bird migration system. You can see that there are red lines. This is the system. This is the flyway. That this flyway is conformed by different small routes. In red lines is the eastern flyway, eastern route, and in blue is the western flyway. The red lines follow the birds that breed in northern Eurasia, especially in northern Siberia, in Russia, and crossing the Middle East, overwinter in the eastern savannas of Africa. And the western flyway receive birds that breed in Western Europe and overwinter in Western Africa. So this system involves around 2 million of raptors, migrating raptors every year. But you can see that the eastern flyway is more important in terms of numbers. It's more than 1.5 million of raptors moving every year, because of the area that concentrates the migration is very huge. While the Western flyway concentrates less than 500 million, is probably 400,000 of raptors every year, because of the area involved is more reduced, is constrained to the Western Europe. But you can see that the existence, the occurrence of those flyways, the eastern and the western flyways, are related with the occurrence of two geographical barriers. One is the Mediterranean Sea, that is 700 kilometers of wide. Is difficult for crossing, close to 1,000 kilometers for crossing the sea. And the other barrier is the Sahara Desert. Is in the central Sahara, there are more than 2,000 kilometers of sand, rocks, and dunes. So both barriers, the Mediterranean Sea and the Sahara Desert, conform a very important barrier for migratory birds. And this is why most of migratory birds try to round about these barriers through the west or through the east, producing a migratory divide in the Central Europe. Part of the birds move to the east and part follow the route to the west. Also, another characteristic of this migratory system is that there are two main migratory strategies depending on the wintering areas. Many raptors breed in Europe and overwinter in the Mediterranean basin, is which we call the short distance migrants or pre-Saharan migrants. And many others cross the Sahara. The Sahara is the big barrier for migrants. Is 2,000 kilometers of nothing, a place where you cannot feed, you cannot drink, and it's a place absolutely harsh and hospitable. But some of the species cross the Sahara, and this is the long distance migrants, the trans-Saharan migrants. One interesting point is that Sahara is a very important conforming, it's a very important factor conforming the raptors species in Europe. Most of the genus of raptors in Europe have a species that is a pre-Saharan migrant and another species that is a trans-Saharan migrant. So the Sahara, the occurrence of the Sahara produce a very important process of differentiation and speciation of the raptors in Europe. Another important question is that not all the raptors migrate the same way. For example, as the raptors have to cross the Mediterranean Sea, and over the sea there are no thermals. Thermals are unusual. Thermals are very important for migration, especially for soaring flyers. This produces that many species of raptors that are soaring flyers, especially larger soaring birds as vultures, eagles, kites, or hawks, the migration occur always over land, so they concentrate in specific bottlenecks as the Strait of Gibraltar, but there are many others in the Eastern Mediterranean, as in the Bosphorus or in the Middle East. And the migration is concentrated in these points, and these are narrow front migrants. On the opposites, there are other species that are flapping flyers, raptors, that they don't avoid to fly over water. They are able to cross the sea with everywhere. And in this case, is the case of the harriers, the ospreys, or the falcons. The migration is not concentrating these bottlenecks in these corridors, and the migration is in a broad front. Comparing both flyways, the western flyways through the Iberian Peninsula, comparing with the eastern flyway through the Middle East, you can see that the numbers involved are different, also the species. The eastern flyway is more important in terms of number of raptors involved and the species. And the western flyway, as the Iberian Peninsula and the Strait of Gibraltar is the only point of contact between the African continent and the European ones. The migration is very similar during the spring and autumn. So the birds use the same route for migrate during the spring and during the autumn. On the opposite, in the eastern flyway, there are more possibilities to cross the Mediterranean or the eastern parts. So there are more, it's more frequent to have different routes, different loops, migrations between the spring and migration. So, and this produces a different high variability in the numbers in the observatories. That is the opposite in the western flyway. And also the species involved are a bit different. For example, in the western flyway are very abundant and dominant. The booted eagles, the short-tailed eagles, Egyptian vultures, griffon vultures, montagnous harrier are dominant in the migration. While in the eastern migrants involve very large eagles, as spotted eagles, steppe eagles, steppe buzzards, and many others different species. You can see in these maps as more than 2 million of raptors are moving every year between Europe, the breeding areas in Europe, and the wintering areas in the Mediterranean and the Sahara. There are many watch points and monitoring programs, and you can see probably the most important watch points or bottlenecks for migration of raptors and the numbers and the species involved. And some of them are Batumi in Georgia, in the Caucasus, that started monitoring in 2007 and is going on nowadays, and counts more than 1 million of raptors every autumn. Eilat is a famous, very, very famous watch point starting in 1970s and concentrating more than 1,100,000 with a daily, yearly monitoring program with some gaps. Falsterbo in the south of Sweden, starting also in 1970s. And the numbers now are smaller because they receive raptors that breed in the Scandinavian area. The Messina Strait in Italy, between Sicily and the continent, is a different area in a coastal area, and the numbers now is more reduced because most of raptors avoid to cross the Mediterranean through the central parts of the Mediterranean, but still the numbers are important. The Western Pyrenees, in the border between France and Spain, the monitoring started in 1980s in different mountain colds and counts around 50,000 raptors every year. And finally, the Strait of Gibraltar, starting the monitoring program in 1960s in the Rock of Gibraltar, and later in 1990s in the broad area of the strait. And this is an area that concentrates around 350,000 of raptors every year. This is the species involved in this Palearctic, African Palearctic migration systems. Vultures, the bigger raptors, with very good numbers of griffon vultures. Also, good numbers of ospreys. The numbers that I show here are the sum of the western, central, and eastern flyway. Large eagles, as the probably is the more abundant is the lesser spotted eagles with more than 70,000 individuals moving, especially through the eastern flyway. Medium-sized eagles, as the short-tailed eagles, the booted eagles, concentrating the western flyway. Also the kites, probably the black kite is one of the most abundant raptor migrating throughout Europe. Black kites and lower numbers of the red kites. Harriers, sorry, 4 species of harriers. The numbers are more reduced, but are still important. Buzzards, and here there are 2 species very, very important in terms of the magnitude of the migration. The honey buzzards that involve more close to 500,000 of individuals every year. And the other species is the common buzzard, especially the subspecies vulpinus, the steppe buzzard that involve more than 300,000 of individuals moving every autumn. Hawks, especially the Levant sparrowhawks, with important numbers, and the common one, the common sparrowhawk. Lesser falcons, involving thousands of birds, especially lesser kestrels and red-footed falcons. And larger falcons as the peregrine, saker, and leonoras, that usually involving lower numbers, no more than a few hundred birds per season. Okay, this is the brief summary about how is migration in the Western Palearctic, and I will focus the attention in the migration, the raptor migration through the Strait of Gibraltar, where we are doing many studies and many research for the last 24 years. This is the position of the Strait of Gibraltar, is the contact between the European continent and the African one. Is a strait, is a small corridor of less than 14 kilometers of wide between the European continent and the African one. And the width of the strait is no more than 40 kilometers, contacting the Atlantic Ocean with the Mediterranean Sea. It's in this small area, is concentrated every year millions of birds crossing from Africa to Europe and vice versa. This is a aerial view of the strait, and you can see the coastline of Africa, the coastline of Europe, and the shortest distance between Europe and Africa is 14 kilometers. 14 kilometers is a very short distance for crossing the sea. It's not. It shouldn't be a problem for raptors crossing this small portion of sea. But okay, this is a view of the Strait of Gibraltar from the Spanish coast, from the Mirador del Estrecho, and you can see the strait, the area of the sea, and in front of us the coastline of the Africa with the mountain of Jebel Musa in the Morocco coast. 14 kilometers is not a long distance for crossing the sea, but the problem of the strait is that most of the days of the year, the area is suffering strong winds, especially cross winds from the east and the west, that push the birds that are trying to cross, push to the sea, to the Atlantic or to the Mediterranean. So the wind is the gate that open or close the strait. 14 kilometers without wind is okay, it's not a problem for raptors. But 60% of the days of the year, the area suffer very strong winds of more than 40, 50 kilometers per hour, many times more than 80 or 100 kilometers per hour. So crossing could be a very risky task for raptors. And the winds also determine how the birds cross the sea, and it's very interesting to study the behavior of birds and how to select the best area for starting to cross, the best elevation to start to cross, and the effect of drift when they are crossing, depending on the winds, if the winds blow from the east in the yellow arrow, or from the west in the red one. You can see the tracks of the birds crossing the strait with different routes. And this is important for us because the position of our observatories have to take into account these kind of things. Also in autumn, most of raptors try to cross using the shortest distance that usually is here between Tarifa and Algeciras. In this sector is the hot area for crossing, is the shortest distance to Africa. And most of them try to cross using the shortest distance. There is a main flux coming from the east, from the Mediterranean coast, another coming from the west from the Atlantic coast, and concentrating this area. This area is not more than 16 kilometers of wide. And in this area, as they try to cross, the winds push the raptors to that direction or to that direction, depending on winds. The area concentrates raptors, they concentrate migratory birds, but also concentrate ornithologists. And there are very good information for the last 2 centuries. But the main studies of migration started in 1970s, at the end of 1960s, in the Rock of Gibraltar with the British people. But in 1970s, the first monitoring programs and counting effort was done, and we have very good information for what happened in 1970s. In 1997, we started a monitoring program. The idea was to have a bioindicator or monitoring program of these extraordinary birds, the raptors, act as sentinels of what is happening in nature, as good bioindicators, are very good thermometers of what is happening. So it's interesting to monitor these sentinels, and we started in 1997. We spent 3 years to design the correct protocols, the efforts, the observatories, how many people, what dates, what hours. The program was promoted by the regional government of Andalusia and currently developed by the Migres Foundation. So the data that we have started in 1997 till nowadays. The program is a long-term and standard monitoring survey of bird migration based on constant effort and volunteering, and cover all migratory species during spring and autumn. For the first 3 years of the program, we spent a lot of time designing. We worked with more than 20 different observatories, counting simultaneously the raptor migration. And finally, with a proper statistical analysis, we had the best choice of observatories. Finally, we select 2 observatories for autumn and another 2 for spring migration. And the idea was to cover 80% of the total migration. With this effort, we don't control all the raptors that cross the strait, but we are sure that control more than 80% of the raptors that cross the Strait of Gibraltar. So it's a sample representative of the overall migration. In this slide, I show you the main effort during the spring. We started in February and finished in May or early June. And this is the time that we done the counts and the observatories. The yellow stars are the main observatories involved in the counts. Punta Carnero is working very well with western winds. and Cazalla is working very well with eastern winds. During the autumn, we work in other two observatories, not located in the coast. They are more inland observatories that control the flux of birds that coming from the Mediterranean area or from the Atlantic one, and concentrate in this sector of the strait. And we start off the 5th of July and finish 15th of October. Some years we run a specific campaign for the griffon vultures, because griffon vultures cross the strait later than 15th of October, concentrate migration at the end of October and November. In some years, we run a specific campaign to control and monitor the griffon vulture migration and crossing the strait. This is a view of the main observatories, Algarrobo, Cazalla for autumn migration, and Punta Carnero, Punta Camorro for the spring migration. We count birds with a team mixed by professionals. Always there is a professional ornithologist in the observatories, but this professional is always helped by a group of volunteers that help in the counts, in the identification, and taking notes of the birds that are there. This strategy, combining professionals and volunteers, produce very high quality data. And as the effort is constant, we repeat the same observatories, the same dates, the same hours with more or less the same teams. The results are very consistent over time. This is the kind of data that we got in the observatories. We take the information in small computers, in small palms, and we take information of date, hour, the species, number of birds, age and sex as possible, direction of flight, and weather variables, wind direction, speed, visibility, cloud coverage. And for every species and every year, we have information about the timing of migration in terms of dates of passage or hours of passage. And as we repeat the same effort, we got good population trends through the time. And also we get good information about changes in phenology throughout the years. This is a sample with a honey buzzard. This is one of the most abundant raptors crossing the strait. And we have information about the magnitude of migration of the honey buzzards during the spring, during the autumn. Also, we got information about the trends in the passage of honey buzzards. Also about the information of timing of migration during the spring, during the autumn, the peaks of migration, the duration of migration. And as we take information of age and sex of birds, we also study the differential migration, the differences between males and females, youngs. Even we can estimate the productivity of the years, depending on the proportion of young detected during the counts. We have got information about numbers, about phenology, but also we have the context of this data. So we need to know where the birds are coming and where the birds are going. So we run complementary activities to understand the process. So we work with a Raptor banding station. We trap and ring between 200 or 500 raptors per year. And this permits us to know the origin and destination of these birds. And with some species, we run also specific projects Here you can see different marking projects using wind tags or GPS transmitters or other device with black kites, lesser kestrels, short-tailed eagles, griffon vultures, Egyptian vulture that permit us to understand better the migration through the strait. And also we use the observatories for other activities as training people, formation, awareness, education, because the area is visited by thousands of ornithologists every year, and all the children from Tarifa and the area of the Campo de Gibraltar visit the observatories, are familiar about the species that cross throughout the year. Okay, the results, the Strait of Gibraltar concentrate, the counts are every year between 350,000 birds of prey, till now that is over 400,000 birds of prey crossing the strait during the autumn migration, involving 28 regular species, including black kites, honey buzzards, booted eagles, short-tailed eagles, snake eagles, sparrowhawks, griffon vultures, and not only the numbers involved that are usually spectacular, it's also the behavior of the birds, of the raptors trying to cross the sea. That is something unusual in this group of birds, because they have a lot of limitations for sea crossing, and it's very interesting to see and to study how they deal with the sea, and also the interaction with other species. For example, the interaction with the birds crossing the sea with the local population of gulls that produce a lot of conflicts. Here is a griffon vultures moved by a yellow-legged gull, and this is a snake eagle also attacked by a seagull. And this is the numbers involved for the 10 main species. There are more or less close to 20 regular species of raptor crossing. Mostly are forest birds, long-distance migrants, and 10 species concentrate more than 99% of the totals. And the most important species in terms of numbers are the black kites. The numbers are around 200,000. The honey buzzard, that during the last years we are registering close to 100,000, and very big numbers of booted eagles and short-tailed eagles. And very important, but with lower numbers, are the marsh harriers, Egyptian vultures, sparrowhawks, lesser kestrels, griffon vultures, Montagu's harrier, and ospreys. And also the richness of the area include some less frequent species, as the imperial eagles, the Ruppel's vulture, the black vulture, Lanner falcons, Eleonora falcons, peregrine falcons, lesser spotted eagles, red kite, and Bonelli seagulls. For some of these species, especially for larger raptors, the crossing is dominant by juveniles, and it's not a true migration. It's really a dispersal movements of juveniles crossing and following the huge flow of raptors. And not all the raptors that cross the strait are migrants. There are many juveniles dispersing. There are also local movements and also some vagrancies. We compare the numbers that cross the strait with the estimations of the breeding population in Europe. And one surprising result is that okay, the numbers that we got in the straits overcome the total estimations for all of Europe. And this is a common result in other observatories. So it's usual that the numbers here in the observatories of the bottlenecks of migration, the counts are higher than the estimations of the breeding population. Probably is because include non-breeders, juveniles, floaters, the parts of floaters of the population. But even that, the numbers overcome several times the estimation of the breeding population. So this is interesting because it's a complementary way of monitoring the population of this important bioindicator species. But for some species, the numbers that we got in the strait are lower than the estimation of breeding populations in Europe, especially for harriers and falcons. And when we got these results, we were studying what happened, why we don't have enough harriers and falcons. We count very few birds, no more than few hundreds or few thousands, but very low comparing with the breeding population. But the cues come from the radar studies done by the Swiss teams in 1990s that operate with a radar, ornithological radar in the coast of Malaga, close to the Strait of Gibraltar. And you can see the orientation of different species moving and going to the strait. And you can see that the black kites, buzzards, follow the coast direction to the strait. But harriers, falcons, and ospreys, as soon as they reach the coast, they cross directly to Africa. They don't go to the strait. So the strait concentrate the populations of most the larger species of saurian raptors, but concentrate a low proportion of flapping flyers as harriers, falcons. Another results come from the birds market with satellite transmitters. Here I show you the tracks of marsh harriers in blue and ospreys in yellow. And you can see that many of these birds market don't concentrate in the area of the Strait of Gibraltar, especially the harriers. They are able to cross in other places from Spain to Africa. Even they can cross hundreds of kilometers here or here. Even some birds coming from France cross directly to Algeria using 1 or 2 days of crossing over the sea without problems. This is the time schedule of raptor migration in the strait. The spring migration concentrates here in February and March. Now exactly we are in the peak of migration. And there is a second peak in May that is because of passage of honey buzzards and griffon vultures. These numbers show the daily average of raptors crossing. So now at the beginning of March, the average numbers is more than 6,000 to 7,000 raptors per day. The postnuptial migration started in July, but the peak and the bulk of migration concentrate on August and September, where more than 7,000 raptors are counted per day. And finally, in October and November, this is the migration of the griffon vultures that concentrate very, very late during the season. And different species show different migratory patterns, some migrating earlier, some later. About the origin and destination of raptors that cross the strait, we analyze the rings, recoveries, and also the tracks of raptors marked with satellite transmitters or GPS. And most of birds or most of raptors that cross the strait are coming from Central Europe and Iberian Peninsula. This is our core area and origination of the birds that cross the strait. More or less the migratory divide of raptor is here, and most of raptors population that breed eastern of this line migrate using the eastern route. When the raptors cross the strait, some of them short distance migrants, as the red kites or the common buzzards, overwinter in North Africa, in Morocco especially. But most of the raptors that cross the strait overwinter in Central and Western Africa. This is the kernels that concentrates the recoveries of raptors ringed in Europe. And this is the destination of most of the raptors that cross the strait. And this is for most of these species, the juveniles, the young birds and immatures spend several years in Africa, and then when they reach the sexual maturity, return to the north for breeding, and they stay in Africa for several years. Also, we are studying the behavior and cost of crossing the sea and trying to estimate the mortality during crossing. The preliminary results show us that mortality is very low, but we are now still analyzing this kind of data. For example, we have marked black kites and other species. Here you can see results of black kites marked with GPS, the tracks of the birds crossing the sea, elevation that they start for crossing the sea, and we work with accelerometers to know the flapping frequency of birds when they are crossing the sea. But sometimes the birds are not able to cross the strait because the weather conditions are very bad, especially strong winds. Is one of the spectacular images in the strait is the concentration of thousands of raptors waiting in the coast for crossing. This is an image of black kites, hundreds of thousands of black kites waiting for 1 day, 2 days, or several days for good conditions for crossing. This happens every year, several times. Sometimes the birds are not able to cross, and they start to follow the coast, trying to find another place for crossing. So birds that, especially juveniles, that they don't cross the strait, follow the coast to the west or to the east, sometimes reaching the Portuguese coast, trying to cross from other areas with different results. Also, we study the crossing of the desert, that this is probably the main barrier, the main problem for the raptors. About the 40% of raptors that try to cross the Sahara Desert have problems. Many of them have to return, and the mortality during crossing the Sahara is very high, especially in juveniles, that 1 of 3 juveniles die when crossing the Sahara. Sahara Desert have very good conditions for thermals, but the problems are the sand storms that are frequent in the desert and produce a high mortality levels in this group of birds. And also we are studying the relationship between the raptors, thousands of raptors in the area, but the area also have hundreds of wind farms operating in the area. And finally, I would like to resume some results of the changes in the migration of raptors in the strait. First, the numbers, as I talked before and I explained before, that for many species, the numbers counted overcome the breeding population estimate. So this is interesting because offer another alternative for complementary information for determining the trends in raptors populations. Also, we are very interested in the changes in the numbers and the composition of the raptors that cross. And the results in general are optimistic. Comparing data of 1970s till now, you can see that the trend in raptors crossing is increasing, especially during the last 20 years. There is a general increase of long-distance migrants, including new recorded species, mainly African ones, but also Eastern migrants. But for some species, we detect a decrease in the numbers crossing the strait, especially short-distance migrants, but some long-distance migrants, usually lesser kestrels, montague harriers, and others. This pattern is similar, and we have more detailed information for the last 20 years. And the numbers in the last 20 years are positive for most of the species. There is a significant increase in the numbers for most of raptors species crossing the straits. But for some species, comparing these results, the numbers that we register in the strait are discrepant with the trends in the breeding populations. For example, there are some species that the breeding populations are increasing in Europe, but we detect a decrease in the numbers of that cross the strait. So this produces a surprising result for us. And this is why the birds that cross the strait show population changes. So we count more or less depending on the population, the trend of the population. But also the numbers are affected by the changes in migration patterns. There is a general result of the general pattern of produced by the global warming and the global change that many migratory species are shortening migration. So if the birds are shortening migration, many of them don't cross the strait because they don't reach the Strait of Gibraltar. So there are new wintering areas in Europe, and there are many species that are changing the pattern. We analyze this information for some species of raptors, especially for common buzzards and also for ospreys, because the numbers in Falsterbo, in Sweden, or in Gibraltar show a reduction in the numbers crossing, while the breeding population in Europe is increasing. We analyze the recoveries of ringed common buzzards in Europe from 1950s till now, and we detect that the proportion of resident buzzards is increasing every decade, and the distance of migration is reducing, especially in the northern populations, along the different decades. So this species probably in the next years don't cross the strait because most of them will be resident in Europe. Another pattern is the colonization of African species. The more studied species are the Ruppel's vulture, the long-legged buzzards, or the lanner falcons that are typical African raptors that are now more frequent here, and some of them are trying to breed in Europe, probably as a result of the global warming. And also, some interesting question is that we are receiving more and more Eastern migrants using the Western route. This is the case of the lesser spotted eagles or the Palearctic harriers. Also, we are studying the timing of migration, and we are detecting that the calendars of crossing is changing. Many species are advancing the passage, others are delaying, and we are trying now to understand why some species are advancing and others delaying. But that many species are changing the timing of migration. And one interesting results that when we analyze the changes of timing and with different variables, we saw that the variable that best predicting the advances in migration dates was the population traits. So the species that don't advance their migration dates were those showing a decline in the European breeding population. So it's important for the species, for the raptors and other migratory species, to be in the correct moment, in the correct place. If they are not able to track the advance of the spring or the summer, they have problems in the productivity and in the long term in the population. And nowadays we are also studying as the climate is warming, is changing the pattern of winds in the straits. The strong winds are more frequent and the intensity of the winds are stronger now. And we are now studying how these changes in the wind pattern are affecting the crossing of raptors, because probably the gate of the winds will be more time closed for the next decades. And this is the summary of my presentation, and I am open to answer your questions, but I would like also to acknowledge the photographers, the colleagues of the Migres Foundation, all the volunteers and collaborators that are essential part of the Migres program. And thank you very much for your attention.
Alejandro, that was fantastic. Thank you so very much. So informative. We have many questions coming in. Are you ready for some questions?
Yes.
Okay. Well, you know what? The first question is nice. It's, what is your favorite raptor and why?
All the species are favorite for me. I worked with the black eyes, probably is one of my favorite raptors, but most of them are spectacular, have their own particularity for migration.
Thank you. I liked your comment on one of your last slides. Watching raptors is nice, but it's an addiction.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So next question. What species are you most concerned about? What environmental threat to migrating raptors are you most concerned about?
Yeah, in general, the raptors that are related with agricultural lands in Europe, especially the Montagu's harrier, lesser kestrels also, probably are the most concerned and with a more risky future. The future of the agricultural lands is terrible in terms of environment, and the raptors that depend on such habitats are in a very high risk of of decline and local extinction. So probably the most concerned species are that.
Thank you. Okay, Hawk Mountain has overcome a history of poaching. Is poaching prevalent at the Strait? And if so, what education efforts are in progress?
Okay, yes, poaching was important in the past, especially in 1916, in 1970s. Even the government paid the poachers and hunters to kill all the raptors as possible. But in 1980s, the laws started to work. The laws, the protection laws started to work and operate. And there is a very strong change in the people awareness about the conservation and especially the raptors. And now the poaching is in the area of the Strait of Gibraltar, even in Spain, is rare. Even as a result of this, the population of the raptors, of most of these raptors, are increasing, are recovering of the past poaching. So I am optimistic about this aspect. For example, in the area of the strait, all the children of the schools of the area of Tarifa, Algeciras, and surrounding villages visited the observatories and received talks about the importance of conservation of raptors. And there is a very big effort to awareness of these local people.
Thank you. The next question is kind of a follow-up question that I had typed in a response to during your presentation, and someone had asked, what are some things that we can do? They are from Texas. What are some things we can do to protect raptors in the wild where we live? So I kind of just typed in some answers, which we typically say at Hawk Mountain, which include, please, when you're using pest control, please don't use rodenticides or insecticides, plant native plants, shop organic, don't litter, especially by the roads, and encourage hunters to use non-lead ammunition, such as copper bullets. So the follow-up question is, why are copper bullets better? I'm a hunter and work conservation in an area where hunting is common. So I'm really glad you asked this question. So a lot of studies have shown lead bullets are poisoning and even killing many of our raptors, and especially our eagles. So lead, when a lead bullet impacts a body, lots of little particles of lead kind of break off the bullet and kind of enter the flesh. And so when hunters leave parts of the dead animal in the woods or in the field, then the raptors come to eat the leftovers, and they are getting lead poisoning, and it's really sad, particularly the eagles. So that's something real simple that you could do to make a huge impact, is to kind of change your ammunition. Okay, so another question. Alejandro, are there any positive or negative impacts of migration changes?
This is the point that we are studying. We are very interested to understand the result of global warming and migration. There is a general pattern that migration is shortening for many species in the next decades, probably a stop of migration. So the behavior is endangered. Perhaps the species is not endangered, the behavior, yes. Probably for many species, the behavior of migration disappear. But we know that this behavior change in a evolutionary time lapse. So migration occurs several times during the evolution of birds, and many species produce a generation of migrants, and in few generations change to sedentary. So yes, this is a point that we are trying to understand how the birds are trying to adapt to the global changes and also global warming. And most of the northern species are declining or reducing the distribution, but also we are receiving raptors from the south, especially for African species. So now the conservation should be more dynamic, because the environment is changing very fast. So our protected area should be adapted to new changes, and we have to be open to receive other species that are colonizing, are changing the distribution to the north, And probably these new areas are important for the conservation of these new species. So this is a challenging moment for conservation.
Yes, thank you so much. So the next question is kind of about ecotourism. Someone is interested, is it worth traveling to Spain to see this and witness this migration? I would say yes. Sign me up. I want to go. And I know Hawk Mountain does many trips to different locations where there's really fantastic bird migration to experience. So Alejandro, are there some eco tours or focus on the Strait of Gibraltar that you would recommend? And maybe do they perhaps fund conservation projects?
Yes, of course. The area receives thousands of tourists, and specifically the ornithologists, the tourism related with ornithology. We estimate that more than 15 to 20,000 people visit the area only for birds. But the area also has other possibilities because there are cetaceans, the Morocco is very close, there are different natural parks. The area is very well, very good accommodation, very good offer of hotels, there are very good observatories, and there are also several local companies that offer very good, very high level of bird watching tours in the area. So yes, I think that the area could be recommended for ecotourism. Yes, of course.
Awesome. We'll have to coordinate a trip.
Yes, of course, of course.
That sounds so good. Well, I think that's our questions. And Alejandro, thank you so much. You are so passionate and what a wealth of knowledge. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. I feel you should go to bed. It's like midnight now.
Yes, of course. No problem. Yes.
And I just want to thank everyone in the audience for joining us as well. Thank you for caring about raptors. We really appreciate it. And I always like to close our webinars with just sharing some upcoming events and programs we have at Hawk Mountain Sanctuary. We'd love to see you there. So first I'd like to share, we have, thanks to generous donors, we have an IDEA fund, and IDEA stands for Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility. So that fund is to remove any barriers, be it financial barriers or other types of barriers that may exist for individuals or organizations to experience Hawk Mountain. And we can also do offsite programs as well. So if you are interested in learning more about our IDEA fund, please contact me, Dawson, at hawkmountain.org. And so spring migration is just around the corner. It starts at Hawk Mountain April 1st. And that first weekend in April is when we have all of our free weekend programs, including live Raptor programs. So come check it out. Other programs, March 15th, we have homeschool happenings, day versus night. March 17th, we have a special behind the scenes tour of Hawk Mountain. And I believe our president is involved with that. And we have our Winter Artisan Series wrapping up the last weekend, March 25th. We have a printmaking workshop, and March 26th, we have outdoor nature sketching. And then, of course, as I mentioned, our spring count and weekend programs begin April 1st. So thank you all so much. And Alejandro, thank you again. And we hope to see you all soon and enjoy the rest of your night. Actually, it's tomorrow now for you. So, and we'll see you later. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Jamie.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Hi.